Hello, and welcome to another episode of Just Keep Writing, a podcast for writers
by writers
to keep you writing.
I'm Nick.
I'm Shingai.
I'm Sameem.
I'm Gabe.
I'm LP.
And I'm Will.
And today we're getting into our next installment of reading through Refuse to Be Done by Matt Bell. This is a book that I really enjoyed. Actually, I might have suggested it, and I'm very excited to talk to y'all about it some more. If you're following along, we are on page 16, and Will left off at widen your page margins. I want to talk about finding generative epigraphs, and I'm going to read from the book right now. Whenever I discover a bit of text like this, I stick it at the front of my manuscript, right after the cover page, so I see it first thing when I open the file. By the time I'm done, I often have 5 or 10, 15 epigraphs, way more than can go into a finished book, but by then they served their purpose, having reminded me of what I was trying to do with my novel when the draft itself couldn't tell me. It references something that I didn't say anything about, so we're going to go back, and I'm going to tell you what he's talking about when he's talking about these epigraphs. While drafting, I often find lines in other books I'm reading that could be potential epigraphs for the one I'm writing. Some of these speak directly to the thematic material I'm trying to address, while others serve as examples of the kind of prose I'm striving to write. Does that sound like a practice that you'd find fruitful? I knew you'd nod, so why don't you say something? Shingai.
Let's start with Gabe.
Okay, Gabe.
I was raising my hand, yeah.
Didn't see it.
So when I read this part, it didn't really resonate for me, honestly. Mm-hmm. Not in the way it was put in the book, but when I thought back to my own process, I have in my Scrivener file a part of it's called like wisdom and phrases and things like that. I don't remember the name of the file, but it's where I have phrases that prompted like a beat in a scene for me. And sometimes I've come up with scenes and beats that I like from those phrases, which those have like, I mean, they have inspired something, not in the way the book says of having it like at the start to remember what you were writing, the feel of the book, the feel of the scene, but indeed like putting the sentences that you find elsewhere or wherever you find them, even if not in fiction, it is super helpful. I mean, it has been super helpful for me in having that list and then just going through that list when I'm feeling like low motivation, low inspiration, maybe. But it's generative, not in the way the book says, but it has worked for me, having those good sentences. It's most often good place of words and, I don't know, like good descriptions, good conversations, a piece of dialogue, whatever. So yeah, that's what has worked for me.
Okay. LP, go ahead.
Oh, did you have something to add?
No, I just think, the idea of like adding the epigraphs or talking about phrases, I tend to draw. So I tend to finish something, a chapter or a scene, and the only thing that gets me back into it if I'm struggling is if I sketch it out. I know that's bizarre maybe to some people. It's bizarre to me sometimes too, but I think, that's one way. I think you just have to find what's going to coax you or inspire you or to like get you into that mood. For me, it's art.
I think that makes sense because you're a multidisciplinary artist, right? Like, and so if one of your other art forms is coding or one of your art forms is dancing or whatever the hell, I mean, I think it doesn't necessarily matter, but I like the idea of this just in that, like, I try to keep a couple of like source texts around so that I can kind of go through them as needed. But I just thought it was an interesting idea. But I don't know. I don't know if it'll work for everybody. I don't think everything will work for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I like the general idea and feel of it, but I don't think I'm like coordinated enough to like collect all that information and have it in the right place at the right time. I think there are things that have been good for me to like have read before I worked on something, but I don't think I was always that like thoughtful about it. In fact, sometimes when I'm sitting down to write, I'm like, I wish I'd had like some sort of trigger to like push me into this space I need to be in, and I don't usually. So I do like, I like the idea of it, and I hope I get to a point where I've read consciously enough and have taken better notes and catalog things like I've got a bunch of books with like sticky bookmarks in them, or like on my Kindle of like highlighted things like that, but I never go back and collect those things. I'm really bad at doing that. And so I feel like there's a lot of potential to make use of this habit, and I just haven't done it.
It's funny because your man's has like a writing journal in addition to like multiple manuscript versions going on any dozens of times. So it's like it feels like he only writes in his office, and when he's in his office, everything is there that he could ever need. Which, sounds like a great place to be. Shingai?
Yeah, I feel like similarly to what a lot of folks are saying, I don't do this as intentionally as is given in the book, but I am like, I'm such a fiend for quotes. Like, I love quotes. Like things that's, I don't know, things that name an experience that I hadn't named before. I think that's what I hold on to. So, for example, there's this one quote that I constantly teach: stories are just data with a soul, because I think it brings across such a big idea in one sentence.
The next bit that Matt talks about is tracking your progress. He talks about how for many years he kept spreadsheets to track first drafts with columns as far as words written and hours writing, formulas to total like the measures for every day. He also keeps a column where he keeps short notes as a quick record of what went well and what they discovered during the day, what questions he might have for tomorrow, also recaps of what was written. For me personally, like tracking my progress sounds like a good idea, but I also think it's a good idea for normies. And I think I might find myself trying to be competitive, and that's usually a good way for me to stop working. Nick and then Sameem.
Okay, so I personally don't like tracking my own progress as far as where I'm at compared to the overall and where I need to be to get to the end. I look at progress on a smaller scale. I'm working on chapter 1. I need to hit X amount of words to be done with chapter 1, or I'm in chapter 3 and I need to make sure that this scene is fully fleshed out before I can move on. I've always kind of experienced it. If I go from like page 1 to page end, start to finish, on tracking, it is so daunting in the beginning. And oh my God, I got to do this over again because there's like 4 more edits to go through and 4 more revisions. I feel like that's where personally I get into my own headspace, and I've seen it for other people as well. Like, so smaller chunk of progress, or like finding a way that you can look at progress and feel like you're making progress, and rather like not, I got so much more to do.
I like that. Sameem.
Yeah, I think that from my personal experience, the tracking is good when I'm further along into the process, but it's not good to get me started. It's really like when it ends up becoming a time suck to like try to organize that tracker and set goals around it and whatnot. And so like the setting up of it becomes more fun than the writing itself. And 2, it just ends up feeling like really daunting. And so I know I've talked about this on the last few episodes, but I think that like what worked for me was setting that just 100 words a day goal. And once I was able to hit that for a couple of weeks, then I was able to put like more tracking in, because then I was writing, the writing part was taken care of. And then I just wanted to know, how am I doing with the writing, rather than using the tracking to get me to write, if that makes sense. And I still have that all in place and I'm still tracking. But like the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've had a bunch of stuff going on, like personal life, traveling and work and stuff like that. So I know I'm not going to hit the same like lofty goals that I might have had before those last few weeks, but I can at least keep track of, that 100 words a day, and then jump off from there when I feel like I'm in a place to start writing at a higher capacity.
Gabe?
Yeah. So on this topic, I honestly have so much to say, but I'll keep it short. For starters, tracking my progress helped me so much, I guess, for the first couple of years, I suppose, that I was writing. Mostly, I would say, because it taught me like many things about the craft itself, like how long things are, like how long is 100,000 words, how long is 1,000 words, both like in the page in a book, and also like how fast I can write. And like I learned my speeds, both like my averages, how much I could write in 8 hours in a day or whatever. Like that was, and it was super like motivating at the start of seeing my progress. And as Nick said, like he doesn't like looking at the progress of the overall thing, but that's what helped me. I created an Excel sheet with a bar that increased the more that I got closer to my goal. It was like 150,000 words that I was setting for my novel. So I knew nothing. I saw that face, LP, because I mean I knew nothing about how long a novel was, and I had to research. Okay, so The Hobbit is this long, and okay, this book is this long. Okay, that's how many words, and then like from that I started learning how much I should write for a thing, X amount of pages. So it was such a learning process doing that sheet and learning my speed, learning how things really are. And it was motivating until it wasn't. When I saw that I had a streak of 15 days that I was not writing. And I saw that on my stupid Excel sheet. So it was a double-edged sword. It was very motivating, but at the same time, it ended up being demotivating. And I stopped writing for months because of that thing. So yeah, I could go on about this for hours, but I'll stop.
I'm stuck on 150,000 word debut. Okay. Sameem.
I just wanted to plus one to a lot of what Gabe just said. I had like a very similar experience, and I think the one of the biggest useful things about tracking was just understanding my own ability and sort of like making it feel less daunting to say like, hey, I actually can write like 800 to 1,000 words in this amount of time when I'm on a roll, and it's not like it is actually doable. And I give myself a year or 6 months, however long it's going to take you, it is achievable. And if but the flip side of that, like Gabe was saying, is like when something happens and you hit a roadblock, you're seeing your like failure. It's like, oh, I could have done this. I know I could have done this. And so I think that's why in the past it's been really demotivating for me. And this time around, I sort of like said, hey, here's the baseline bar. Worry about the baseline, track what you do above that, but just worry about this really low baseline. And that's taken a lot of the pressure off for me.
Will Ralston.
I will write down how much I've done each day, but that it's actually never motivated me. It would be a way that like, all right, I want to hit this. It used to be I wanted to hit this number of words, but now I can't look at things like that. And I think it's because of my practice of art. So like when I'm building a painting, I have to block in all these shapes, right? First, because you can't get detailed first. You actually kind of have to start blocking out the shapes to create the picture. So for me, what motivates me is thinking, what do I want to achieve in the story in this part? What will make me feel accomplished or satisfied? So say it's like I want to get to the actual murder. Well, I can't yet because I have all this other things that need to happen. So I just keep writing towards that goal of the murder happen. And if I only write 200 words, that's fine. I just know I need to go back and write towards that point of the scene. I only track the number of words as a means to kind of gauge maybe of like where I'm at and how long I think I'm far away from the end of the chapter. But I can't analytically look like what Gabe does and like, oh, well, this is my average and I didn't do anything today. My brain just no longer wants to work that way. And I think it's because I'm practicing so much visual art.
Gabe?
What Will said it's something that, as I said, like it helped me thinking that way and it taught me things, but I think it depends on the stage you're at in your writing, at least for in my own experience. Like it helped me a lot, but now I know that if I have, as we were talking before recording, I need to write a 4,000 word short story, but in 2 weeks. Knowing what I can do now, I can sort of, and having an adult life, I now know on average how much I have to block out to write those things. Because I mean, now I have this Excel sheet that Will mentioned again. Is I have a calculator that if I need to write 100,000 words for whatever project, and if I put my averages, it's gonna give me the date when I'll be finished with that. And I've put in the months of how long it takes to edit and all those things. But in the end, it's just learning your process. For me, it was about learning about my own process and hearing my friends. I mean, there are people that can write 2,000 words in an hour. I cannot do that. Like, there's no way. But I learned that through tracking my progress. If not, I would have never known the numbers. And now it's been super useful lately. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I just want to go back to that because, I guess like the word count does help say, okay, I need to at least write this much, right? Like we have, me and Gabe are getting ready to, by the time you've listened to this, we've already been to our writing retreat. But right now we're gearing up for our writing group to actually meet in person. And we are going to give at least a minimum of a 4,000 word story. So for me, like, yes, like you use that as a bar of like the minimum of it. But then once I really get into a story, I feel like all of that lately, and this is just something that's happened in the last 4 months, all of that has like gone out the window. It's really been more of, I need to get to this certain place to actually see the story. And I feel like it's only because I'm also a visual artist. So I'm seeing things in a different way because my practice of drawing and painting is stronger than it ever has been. So I have a question then too. I don't know. So I guess for those who have technical, like corporate America jobs, like, do you think of your writing in those aspects? Like, do you use some of that skill set that you have to use in corporate America, which honestly, I have no idea what it's like. So I just imagine people like breathing down your neck and being like, you have to hand this in, you have to do this, you have to do that. And I'm like, it all sounds like craziness to me.
I actually recently had the reversed experience where I feel like getting a better handle on how much I can get done in like a 30-minute block or an hour block has actually motivated me to be better at work in a weird way. And I think this might have been like, this might have started for me like before the pandemic as well, but just I think this is more of like a parenthood thing. Just made me lose a sense of like how long things take. And I would not start tasks at work sometimes because I was like, there's no way I can get this done without like an 8-hour block of time. And therefore it just doesn't get done. And so I feel like learning to make things into bite-sized pieces and writing a novel, I feel like is much more daunting than everything I have to do at work, to be honest. And being able to break that down sort of taught me how to retaught me how to break things down in other aspects of life too.
What about you, Gabe?
I mean, for starters, abilities with Excel sheets with numbers. That's what I've put in. I love Excel sheets for everything. But another thing is like setting realistic expectations with objectives. Like having that, that at least what I do at my job is the basic thing. If you don't set objectives that you can actually do, like you can dream whatever, all you want, any project you want. But if you don't set the steps that are needed to complete that, and I think I've put that into my writing, but I didn't know how to execute that until I knew how, again, what I said before, how much I could write, how long things had to be. Like the sizes for flash and short stories and novellas and novels and debut novels, as you were saying, LP. But yeah, it's just being, and a bit of what Sameem said, like just being more efficient, I suppose, with my available time for a thing. So yeah,
I think that there's an interesting way in which a lot. I envy the folks who work in corporate jobs, but I also envy Will in that like his job his school life is like making art, but like also his work life is making art like out of people's hair, right? Like he's always looking at these things and figuring out how to make them better. And there's a little like troubleshooting in like all these parts of their lives. And I wish that I didn't just wait tables because I can't figure out how to turn the things that I know how to do from work into something that'll translate well into like my writing life, other than like getting people the fuck out of my way so I can get back to work.
Telling people what to do?
No, you know what?
What to do at work.
You are a great observer of people.
Oh, that's true.
And you can really judge someone. Like, you can judge someone's character right away. I've seen you do it. And I think that is a really great soft skill that it's not something that can be learned, but it's something you can do through experience of constantly working with people. Because guess what? Being a server is like multitasking on top of multitasking. And I think what it is reflected in your fiction, and I said this before on the podcast, but you have like a melody in your words. And I feel like that comes also not from you practicing music, but you're around people all the time. You hear the way people sound, the way people talk. Like, that is how your job most likely, in my opinion, would influence you in soft ways. Where when I think about what Gabe does, that's like a hard skill. That's something that is taught and learned, and then he internalized it and like used it in different ways. I could never operate that way with Excel and everything. I had enough of that fucking shit in biochemistry, and it can go to fucking hell.
I agree with having a soft skill. I just wish I had like a couple hard skills to throw in there sometimes just to like balance it out just a little bit.
Yeah, but
I do think that like being able to gauge social dynamics and be up on your feet and do all that like in a split second and know how like a table is going to react, or know when they sort of like preempt them reacting however you don't want them to react. I don't know, I think it's both a technical skill and an art at the same time. Just being able to handle chaotic social situations like that.
I agree though. I agree. I just want some hard skills.
I was thinking of, asking Nick and Shingai about like their experiences in the MFAs and how that, how did you apply? Tracking your progress and having deadlines and knowing how much you could write to be able to meet those deadlines and be successful at school, at writing school. So, yeah.
Well, that's a good question.
It is.
Because oh boy. So it's not a brag. It's just my ability, and I don't know why it's an ability, but it is. If I want to throw if I want to throw down 4,000 words in a night, I'll throw down 4,000 words in a night. If I want to do that for a week straight, I'll do it for a week straight. Now, it is word vomit, and it's getting better, but that's actually what got me through my MFA. Because I'm not great at outlining. I can do it if I need to, which I did for my novel. But like, I really excel at pantsing and figuring out how to fix the problem later. And so for me, like, going through an MFA is totally different because I'm not producing work to be published. I'm producing work to learn. Which I take that in. I'm producing work to learn, not producing to publish. Those are two different things. They're not two different styles of writing, but the quality is different. It's giving me the permission and the ability to take a risk. I wrote a gay sex scene for our romance section, and I loved the hell out of it. Did I nail it? No, probably not. Was it good? I don't know. I'm a straight guy writing two gay characters having sex. So it's in a trunk. It's in a shelf somewhere. I'm willing to share it with those who want to read it. But I enjoyed it so much. Like, guys, it was so much fun. Like,
my inbox is so horny for it. Let's go.
I'll send it. I think Will, you might have read it too, but like, it was so much fun because I was learning how to connect the physical aspects of a relationship and how to properly emote them in a book? I can describe sex all day long, but how do you describe the emotional feeling behind the physical touch? So, and that's what the MFA is for. Is like, I took that risk. I loved it. It was great. It's a skill set I now have, as opposed where, I want to write for the Syria International Writers Conference contest. That's a whole different level and whole different ballgame and different objective. So I will approach that differently. Shingai?
I don't know if I can top that answer. That was that was brilliant and so accurate. And I think something that I miss about the MFA is feeling like my writing had the space to be anything and everything all at once, including the shittiest parts of itself. And I definitely was never at a point where I could write 4,000 words a day, but I did write the second half of my novella in one day. So there was that. And maybe it's because, the pressure was off. I wasn't thinking about publishing. I was thinking about workshopping it, which is different. Yeah, whether I track changes or movement throughout my drafting process, no. I don't.
Well, I'm glad we didn't move on from this question because this got very interesting. I'm not sure how far we are on time right now. I'm going to introduce one more section because we're moving into a subsection called You Begin, which I'm super excited to talk about because this is everything we've talked about up through this point is preparing yourself to write. And this is where the book takes you into actually drafting. And so I'm excited about this part, but I think this will have to be the last part. You Begin has its own thing, but then there's a portion of it called Write to Produce Inspiration. Reading from the text, I'm on page 19. No matter how well things begin, eventually I get stuck too, especially once I'm a good 20 or 30,000 words into a draft. So far, my experience has been that beginnings are easy, middles are dreadful, and endings are inevitable. Whenever this happens, I take a deep breath and think of Lucy Corrin's advice. You should look at the material you produce to find your material. The story is always smarter than you. There will be patterns of theme, image, and idea that are much savvier and more complex than you could have come up with on your own. Become a student of your work in progress. Every aspect of a story has its own story. And he says, poet Tracy Brumhall said, she writes in order to produce inspiration rather than at the mercy of it. And that's how I want to write too, especially during generative drafts. When you get stuck, look at the material you've made and use it to produce fresh inspiration. It takes a lot of inspiration to write a novel. Here are some ways you might renew yours. What? I don't even know if I should stop there. But do you look at your work to think about how to move your work forward? When you're stuck, do you give it a rest and come back and look at it again? Do you use it as a springboard? How do you manage that? Will?
I read only the last 3 sentences. And if I don't remember it, and this is for the first draft, I don't care. I just go with what I'm feeling. This is what I'm writing right now. Does that mean my first drafts are absolute mess? Yeah, 100%. But again, I feel like this is where my art and practicing art for the last year intensely has changed the way that I write. It's made me think of when you're drawing or you're sketching, right? Like when you're just really sketching, like the idea of a sketchbook is to create and generate ideas. Sometimes it'll look really good. Sometimes it won't. Most times it won't. Most times you're trying to figure things out. So this is what I've really this is what's made me start writing even more, because now I can go into it and I am just going to write and go with whatever flow I have. And I have an idea in mind, but sometimes the nuances will change, or sometimes I'll have a better idea and I'll change right in the middle of it. And I no longer have this fear or this gripping thing of that I can't write. everything is in process. Everything is about getting better. And plus, like, I'm dyslexic. So, like, half the words that I write don't make sense at first. Nick knows this.
Shingai.
I kind of want to speak to Will's point about just like how you come to the page not necessarily knowing what came before in the way that you knew it when you were writing it. And how like that offers like a diversity of feelings in the whole story. Because I was doing this with my novel where there were moments late last year where I was like deeply sad or deeply angry. And I was like, I need to write a scene about anger or sadness. And I think that writing from that perspective adds honesty to that scene because I am experiencing it as I'm writing it. Even though it may not be the scene that should follow directly after the last scene that I had written when I was like happy-go-lucky version of myself. Yeah, so it's just interesting thinking about it and like how being true to what you're feeling as you're writing and just following the feelings and the emotions gives a range of different honest emotions.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, jumping off what Shingai said and the question of if we look back to our own things to be able like to get inspiration or get unstuck and stuff, what has got me unstuck in that sense is actually looking at the feeling of a scene. And I mean, not actually looking at it, rereading a scene that I know was either hard for me to write or that I'm excited about or that makes me feel things. And I just reread that thing and it gets me into the excitement of the story if I've forgotten it or like the feel of the story. Because sometimes we start with one, maybe a theme or a feeling for a scene or story, and then we forget it either from time or whatever. And then going back to that, like, yeah, this is why I was writing this. So it has, I mean, at least for me, it has been super, super useful. Both looking at the previous 3 sentences, but also looking at what got me excited about this story and about writing in general. So yeah, it's really good to. I mean, sometimes you find something that are like, damn, how did you write that? Oh, in a bad way, like, dude, like, what were you thinking? But there's good stuff out there too. Back there, I mean.
One of my old revision processes, I don't know why I stopped doing it, but one of my old revision processes is to open 2 documents side by side. One was the last document and one is the new document, which is blank, and just start retyping it and building stuff into it and trying to find the place where it stopped feeling honest. And if I could go to an honest place after that, then like that would be the new direction that it went. The thing is that like I have a story with like 18 drafts and it is not done. And so I don't know if that was the most effective one, but like, I don't know. I think there's some honesty in that bit of advice. Since I've been told we have a little more time, I'm going to combine 3 sections because I think they go together. Page 20, Writing the Islands. If you ever find yourself unsure what comes next, try what Charlie Smith calls writing the islands. Instead of writing the scene after scene in order, and then, write the big scenes you already know, no matter how far off they seem. Once those scenes exist on the page, the task then becomes writing between these scenes, knowing destinations, creating bridges to connect these islands. A secret possibility, your exploratory draft might turn out to be nothing but these islands, discovered one after another, so might the final book. And then the next portion is called Follow Your Excitement. Writing the islands also means getting the best stuff you have so far out of your head and onto the page, making room for new best stuff to arise. Always go to where your energy is the highest. Your excitement will generate more excitement, and you will avoid the alternative where your boredom generates more boredom. Rachel Kushner says, the writing has got to have this kind of energy where I think I'm onto something and I figured out a track and the language to keep me onto that thing. I'm keen on a type of writing where I can feel the pleasure of the author. Even before you know what your book will do for readers, you can pay attention to what it's doing for you. Now I'm skipping to page 24. Beware of have to scenes, which watch out for any scene you feel you have to produce, especially if you don't want to write it. And I think that speaks a little bit to the idea of like not writing things that bore you because they will also bore the reader. And I just thought that sequence was super interesting, and that it was like write the scenes that you can see the most in your head, the ones you're most excited about, and then write the next scene you're most excited about, and don't write the scenes you think you should be writing, because that excitement is powerful. And I know that's kind of anathema for a lot of people because a lot of people write chronologically. How have you used this method before? Is this something that you think you could use, or does this just sound batshit to you? Sameem.
I think I used to try to do this, and like I have so many novels that are just like 3 or 4 scenes completely out of context. And what I committed to do this year with this novel is I can write aspects of those scenes in notes, but my writing goals are all around like prose to progress plot, because I'm trying to figure out what is happening in between, because I kind of have a sense of like what those islands are, and I know I'm gonna like them, and I'm excited to get there. And I won't completely stop myself from writing aspects of them. I think the issue I've had with that in the past is I write those and then I stress out about how do I get there, without really knowing where to begin even. So I have trouble like working backwards from that. Mm-hmm. That said, I'm also not really writing like chronologically. I'm like vaguely like, yeah, this is the type of thing that could happen next. I'm not sure what could happen next, but I kind of want to hang out with these characters in this location and throw these aspects in it. And either that's going to get rearranged chronologically later, or it'll get cut completely. But it does help me sort of like explore and continue on. And I think that sort of goes back to what the question just before, where I end up like writing what I'm feeling, but putting it into a scene without really any intention, just to see where it goes. Yeah. I feel like I had something else to say, but I forgot, so I'm going to stop talking now.
Shingai.
Yeah, I think Sameem's point was really cool. I feel like this advice is so useful for writing short stories also. Because I realize that I have a tendency to like, have, I don't know what they're called, but like, you know how when you write a story, you can have headers for different sections? Mm-hmm. And that helps me keep track of the story that I'm trying to tell. Because usually I want this to happen, and I want this to happen, and I want this and this to happen. Mm-hmm. Or if I'm following a certain theme. With the last short story I wrote, I was thinking a lot about Frantz Fanon and Black Skins, White Masks. And so I titled each section Black Skins, White Masks. And that helped me keep track of like the story, even though they weren't happening the story itself wasn't following a linear fashion. So that's really useful. With novels, it's a lot easier to forget how to do that, because you think the world is so big and you're like, oh wait, I'm trying to ground the reader in like what is happening from point to point to point. But I do think that he's correct. I think that like the reader will be more excited to read what you're more excited to write. So it comes through the scenes that you were really excited about writing becomes very obvious to the reader. Like I was having a really hard time writing fight scenes or scenes about like combat, because that's just not my specialty. And I'm really good about writing about feelings and conversations that are very feeling heavy and like trying to unpack shit. And one of my friends who read one of the combat scenes that was in my novel was like, okay, you're so slow in like such a grounding way in all the other things you write. But then this scene, you just like brush through it and I couldn't feel what was happening. And I was like, that makes sense because I didn't enjoy writing it. And I've been thinking a lot about how to come to a scene or a type of thing that you're not good at writing from the angle or the perspective that you're good at writing. So like, how can I come to battle or combat from what is being felt? And maybe that would be useful in me coming back to write it. But I think that's definitely a revision thing. In the first draft, I'm very down for like going to the next exciting thing and then coming back to fix the problems later.
I'm raising my hand, but I'm also processing what Shingai just said, which is amazing. I'll go back to the episode, actually, to think more on that. But about writing the islands and what you said, LP, I think those three topics connect really well. In writing the islands, following the excitement, and beware of the have-to scenes, and more so in a first draft, I would say. Because, I mean, in my experience, when I started writing, I thought I had to write chronologically. I knew nothing. And then I realized that I was very excited about scenes very far in the future, like 100,000 words in the future. It's like, but no, I want to write that. So I did. Again, I knew nothing, but then I knew more. And then I started writing all the islands that I was excited about in my novel. But then it's funny, when I got my writing groups, I was starting to share stuff with them chronologically. And then I got to a point that I had not written in my novel, and I literally crashed and burned and didn't write a single thing for 6 months because I had not figured out that stupid scene until I realized, like, you idiot, or, well, I mean, said lovingly to myself, that was not working. So I went for the scenes that I was excited. I wrote a short story and I just followed the excitement. And now I'm making so much progress that I cannot believe it myself, just following the excitement, following the dopamine. And coming back to the have-to scenes, I think it doesn't matter at all for a first draft. Unless you're like on deadline and you're more advanced in your career and you have to have your draft for a certain date, like to sit and, okay, this scene has to do this and this and this to find the function of that scene. But I mean, for a first draft, the scene just have to freaking exist. Like, that's, I don't know. And yeah, it harkens back to what Shingai said of, if you don't know how to write this scene, go to your strengths. That's the thing that I have to digest later. Look for your strength and your excitement about that scene. Like, don't think about the function when it's a first draft. It's just write that thing, write what's exciting for you. Just get that shit out there. Will?
I mean, I can speak to having to write on a deadline right now because I am writing a bi-weekly webcomic and I'm not drawing it. Like, it also is going to Sebastian. I still think it is called Vessel and it is on Webtoon right now. By the time this airs, it's also going to be on Tapas.
Good. So we'll just put it in the show notes. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly. I would say, for me, I write that script. I get everything out. Then it goes through the iteration of me and Sebastian will read it. Sebastian will read it. And then we will do the art. And then right before we're like a week before we're getting ready to publish it, we actually go through the whole entire script and see what he needed to change for visually. So I still think there is a lot of wisdom of just getting it out, even if you are on deadline, because you have to go through that. I think there's very few authors that we've interviewed here on the podcast that has ever said, that would ever say that, like, oh, I wrote this first draft and I handed it off to my editor. They're very few, or they're very seasoned, you know, and let's be honest, I found out a couple people who were published authors who were really well, where they've done a first draft, handed it in, and it needed to be complete rewrites. Complete. And they still went on acting like that to the public. Their first draft was like great, and they only had to tweak a couple things. So let's just get rid of that idea. Because if it's going to be great, then it definitely needs more than a first draft. Nick?
Yeah, so I'm going to be the devil's advocate on this one, guys. I do like write what's exciting, but I also will say that you've got a right to write as well. I think the more that we do the writing thing, the less we need to be inspired and excited to write the thing as well. And again, playing devil's advocate, because I'm clearly not on this level where I can just sit down and write the things that are boring. Like, I'm still writing between the exciting things. But I think as we get better, we progress and we grow, we're not just working off excitement anymore. It does become a job. We've trained ourselves in our brains to write the boring stuff because we know how to do it and we can get it done. And we're still excited about the other things. I got 3 people with their hands up, so like I'm like causing a riot, and I love it. Let's hear it. 4, 5, let's go.
It's okay. I start because I hit it first, and I'm also moderating this whole. No, I think the other side, playing the devil's advocate to your devil's advocate. I think part of the aspect of becoming seasoned is learning how to choose scenes that don't bore you, right? Choose scenes that speak to that excitement, and then you're excited to write them regardless. I don't think it's a conversation. What I think Matt is saying isn't that like, oh, don't write boring scenes. Boring scenes aren't necessary. I think what he's saying is if you have a good amount of enthusiasm about all the scenes that are in the book, then that enthusiasm will carry through for the reader versus like, oh, well, yes, write to write, but like that doesn't mean that you have to waste your time writing scenes that you're lukewarm about. My thought. Gabe, Will, Shingai.
Just to quickly, what blew my mind about what Shingai said before is that it's in those scenes that are hard, that will be hard and that you're not really excited about. I mean, thinking of finding the thing that you are actually good at writing, if you're good at dialogue, good at feelings, good at world building, whatever you're good at, sometimes in those scenes that you're saying, Nick, that you just got to do the thing, I think at least this is resonating so much with me of, yeah, I'm not excited about this. I'm going to find what I like about writing in general, what I'm good at even. So, yeah, I mean, damn, I'm still really. Go ahead.
Well,
yeah, but the thing is that, you have to do it to write the boring. I mean, if you're writing anything and you're bored, then the scene's boring. Like, sometimes you have to get through it and then go back to make it exciting. Or there's certain things that you don't want to write because of either you're not you have to pour in a certain type of emotion, and you can't, and you have to work through that emotion, right? And, you can't always, have the same type of enthusiasm of like, personally me, I love writing fight scenes. I actually feel like it's the one place I actually shine, but that's because I fight, right? Like that's because I spar. So like I get into the whole entire rhythm of it. The scenes that I think I have the most trouble with, I would say, is sometimes description. So I'll put brackets in here, describe the cave or describe the house, and I'll just skip over it and do it later because I'm in the zone of I want to get to a certain part. So I think it's just, if you're bored, put a little bracket in there and then come back to it, because eventually you'll be ready to write it and write it dynamically. So that's how I think of those scenes.
I like
Shingai and Sameem. Shingai and Sameem.
Yeah, I think kind of similar to what everyone else has been saying. One of the things that I realized during this conversation is that, like, what do we mean by being bored with a scene? I feel like if we're bored, it's because we don't understand what it is we're trying to write, right? Like, if I'm excited about the character, I'm excited about the story that I'm trying to tell, then even the scenes that they are doing that I'm like, this is really hard to get through, it's probably because like I don't fully understand why they're doing it, like why they have to do it. And maybe if I spend time trying to understand it more, it will become more interesting to me, or I'll find the things in it that are interesting to me, and then I can speak to it from that angle. Yeah. So I like also like Will said, like pausing and then coming back and finding a way to be more dynamic. I also really like the fact that, like, you know, because Will spars, fighting scenes make, like, he understands fighting. Like, that makes sense to him. I don't, because I don't do it. So it's like something that I need to understand more.
Sameem?
I think I was gonna back up Nick a little bit on his advocation of the devil. Only, and this is maybe for me personally, I think being bored with a scene is less of an issue than finding a scene hard to know what to do with. And one of the reasons why I'm forcing myself not to skip those right now is because I will never want to go back to them, no matter what. So what I found for me personally, at least with this project, and I feel like every project is going to be a little bit different, but pushing through those scenes that I don't care about leads me to a scene that I'm excited about that didn't exist before in my head at all. And so I think and I think it's helped me sort of build the muscle of just like writing to push through something, knowing full well that like that might be a block of text that's going to get cut or heavily edited. But I just needed to push through it to figure out where the next scene that was actually going to be interesting to me was going to be.
Nick.
I like that. So kind of to bring my comment full circle, I really like Shingai, what you did. You kind of define what boredom was, because that was going to be my next question. Like, well, what's bored? What are you bored of a scene, or are you bored of the story that you're trying to write? I feel like if there is excitement, to Gabe's point too, like about what you're writing, the scenes aren't necessarily boring, but if you feel bored in them, there may be a different problem going on with them. And obviously, if this is a first draft, do write what you're excited about. There's certain scenes that you know will work in the book. Just write it. I'm a chronological guy unless something's broken. So for me, the only reason I jumped out of order is because I was bored with my first 10 chapters and I knew I didn't have my character voice correct. So I skipped 3 chapters ahead and started there and then went back and rewrote. And so for me, like, I liked the premise of what I was writing, but I was getting bored, and then I knew I needed to make a change. And that's one of the reasons I would skip ahead. But yeah, thanks for defining those terms a little bit there for me, Shingai and Gabe. And Simi, I really like what you said too when it comes to hard scenes, like skipping those and knowing, or writing through and knowing that you're going to have to heavily edit or delete. I think that's what I'm learning the most right now in my current novel, is just pushing through a scene just to get the words out and then using that as a structure for later.
And this has been Just Keep Writing, a podcast for writers, by writers, to keep you writing. You can find us at justkeepwriting.org. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Feel free to reach out to any of us on our social medias, and please jump in our Just Keep Writing Discord channel. Links to all of that is in the show notes. Lastly, please support our show by going to patreon.com/justkeepwriting. We offer daily writing prompts, early access to podcast episodes, and much more. Thanks for listening, and just keep writing.